Welcome to Strain on the Game, the podcast that reveals what it really takes to keep elite footballers performing at the highest level. I'm Stephen Warnock, former Premier League player, joined by physical performance expert Adrian Lamb. From training ground truths to the financial impact of fitness, we discuss the often overlooked challenges behind the beautiful game. In this week's episode, we're talking about pre-season and what the setup really looks like behind the scenes. Follow us on social media and YouTube at Strain on the Game. Subscribe, like, and follow. So let's talk about the run. The run that every club have got. It's a different type of run, but it's known as, in pre-season, we've got to get the run out the way. And I think we're seeing at the moment StatSport, who are a GPS company who do they're almost like bras that the players wear, aren't they? And they hold the little information in the back, and they've been showing a lot of clubs at the moment of doing specific runs and what's different. And I think one that stood out to me was Thomas Frank at Spurs, and he's got the 1,000-meter run, which is 10 lengths of a football pitch in roughly about 3.5 minutes, isn't it? So what's your thoughts on those runs, and what's your go-to run? Because I bloody remember it.
It's good, wasn't it? It was, well, we're doing this today, and everybody's head would drop, and oh, for God's sake, not this shit again. But there's so. Going back to a question you asked about managers that I've worked with and who drives the pre-season program, and new managers coming in, don't necessarily, you don't have a relationship with them yet. You don't have a relationship of trust. They don't know, where you come from. Often we'll see new managers coming in with their own staff, and they'll bring in fitness staff. So the Thomas Frank one is a really interesting one for me, having been in that position a number of times where I've been an existing member of staff and a new manager has come in, and I've designed a pre-season based around the way that we used to play. And my first question to the new manager coming in is, how do you want to play? And sometimes they're like, well, what's it got to do with you? It's none of your business, sort of thing. Just get them fit. And then, because you haven't established that relationship. So then it's like, so what do you want from me as a fitness coach? What do you want? And sometimes Thomas Frank will come in. Has he brought a fitness coach with him and his staff? I'm
not entirely sure, to be honest with you.
Right. So let's assume
I think he has.
Let's assume that he has. The only person at Spurs that will know how Spurs are going to play this season is Thomas Frank and his staff that he's brought with him. So that 1,000-meter run that he's doing, it's not a Tottenham Hotspur run. It's probably not from their fitness staff because they haven't done it previously. Thomas Frank, we know, did it at Brentford. I suspect he probably did it at other clubs as well. But he will be using that test as an indicator of this idea of fitness is very specific to the way we want to play. And he will be making judgments fairly or not fairly, depending on the point of view of the player, of who can do it, who is capable of doing the work and is physically capable of playing the way that I want to play. And he will be looking at the outcome because he'll be very, very familiar with that run. And he'll be thinking of, oh, when I had Christian Eriksen, he could do this. And when I had this player, he could do this. And when this player in this position. And he will straight away be making judgments because staff make judgments on players every single day, all the way through pre-season.
But, okay, so my question to that is, how can you, if you're a manager going into a new club, how can you make a judgment on players until they're fully fit on doing that run? Because I know that they'll have done work over close season, but also as well, sometimes when you go into a run and you're not mentally prepared for that run because you don't know what it is, it becomes a little bit different. So if you were to do that run on day one and you don't do quite well at it, you think, well, hang about, I'd pace myself a little bit differently. So I will get a better result down the line. Well, even if you did it 10 minutes later, you'd probably get a better result because you'd do it a little bit differently, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's definitely a difference. And and you'll be more qualified to to answer this than I will. When Thomas Frank was appointed quite early on in the off season, wasn't he? There was a
Yeah, yeah.
reasonable amount of time between his appointment and the start of pre-season. So if you're a player in that situation, I would expect you to think, right, I've got a new manager coming in. He's going to be making decisions on me. I want to I want to make a good impression on day one. So if you've ever been in that position in the off season, does your work, because the off season, I mean, I look at pre-season as being, it isn't, you probably see it as a player as a start point
Yes.
of, whereas I see it more as it emerges out of the off season program that I've sent you. I expect players to be in a certain level of fitness based on the off season program that I've given them to do through the summer. And so when there's a managerial change as a player, do you think I better get my finger out of here and
Yeah, of
and and
course you
do it?
have. Yeah, but the other thing is that what you've got to take into consideration is that there's different styles of training as well. So I've had managers that come in, and you can be as fit as you like, and suddenly they're playing a different style of football, and you do a lot of walking around the training ground because it's so tactical, and you're like, this is boring, and you
Yeah,
switch off and you lose interest. Then you'll get some that are very high tempo, um, very dynamic in the training session, but you've gone from being slow into a new style and you've got to get up to speed. And often it feels like you're getting judged straight away. So I think there's got to be an element of a bedding in period, not only for the manager, but also for the players as well to understand that difference of what's being asked. I think a run's a little bit different. I think
yeah,
you'll get through a run, but
yeah,
actual training sessions and sometimes understanding what the manager's trying to put across as well can be a little bit different. So I think from a
yeah,
running point of view, you'll always go back fully fit, ready to go if there's a
yeah,
new manager in. I had it at Villa, and you were part of the staff, weren't you, when Paul Lambert came in?
yeah.
And I was told during the off season that I was surplus to requirements, and in my head that was just I'm going to prove you wrong,
Yeah.
and I'm going to come back fit as anyone. And I remember this, and whether you'll back me up on it, I don't know, but I ran over everyone in that preseason.
Oh,
I made sure I
absolutely. Yeah,
came back, and I thought if he gets rid of me for my for some other reason, then fair enough. But he's not getting rid of me from a lack of not being fit and not being the best in preseason. And the hardest thing I took from that preseason was every time we did a run or pretty much felt like it, he was always like, look at his attitude, look at him running over everyone. He's the fittest here. And I thought, I'm winning him over here. I'm doing exactly what I thought I could do all preseason. And then it got to we played Nottingham Forest. We came back from America, played Nottingham Forest at Forest. Granted, I didn't play well. I was absolutely knackered, jet lagged to death after we come back from America. And then walked in the office on I think the Monday morning. He went, right, that's you done. Bearing in mind that was Monday and we were kicking off on the Saturday for the Premier League season. Yeah, you won't be playing this season. And I thought, I've just done all that work
yeah,
and still not won you over. And that was very hard to take, but that's a different story. But there was still a mindset of, I'm going to prove you wrong.
yeah.
Um, and that's just the way you've got to approach it.
Well, and that's again, as a fitness coach, you've got those players who are surplus to requirements when a new manager comes in. Or maybe not. Maybe it's even an existing manager, and he hasn't managed to move them on. There's
Yeah.
there's 2 points to this, and I'm going to come back to the run. But the the 2 points is it's always the fitness coach that gets these players that the manager doesn't want. I want you to work with them.
Cheers.
No, but it is, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like you work with them, I can't use them. And it's look,
And by
lads,
the way, it's absolute bollocks the way they get treated. Utter
yeah,
bollocks. It's
no,
like it's so unfair on the players because you sign them to a contract, you put them on a contract, new manager comes in, doesn't want you, and you've got no respect for the player. It's absolute bullshit. But that's a different side thing.
I always take the view, and you sort of have to be careful when you are a member of staff, but you are working with players who you think are being treated unfairly, because there are players that will record what you say as a member of staff and use that if it goes to tribunal. So you have to be a bit, yeah, you know what I mean? But there are players who get the mushroom treatment. And for
Yep.
those of you who don't know what the mushroom treatment is, it's, well, how do you grow mushrooms? You keep them in the dark and shit on them from time to time. So that was that, and the fitness coach is always and the message that I gave to players in that position was, right, you are going to get a move at some point because you're a good player, so be ready for that and use this as that. Don't allow this to demotivate you. And you're working with sometimes 3 or 4 players, and the way they get treated is we don't want them in the training ground when the other players are in. So they're coming in at 4:00 in the afternoon. Bring them in, and part of that mushroom treatment is bring them in unsociable hours, get them in, work them, make sure you're making it as uncomfortable an environment for them as possible, because we want them out the door. Because until they go out the door, I can't get somebody new in the door. So that's a difficult part of the job, but you always get 3 or 4 players like that in pre-season.
Yeah, of course you do.
My run was we called it the Premier Endurance Run. It was actually one that I first came across through Sam and Mark Howard had developed it at Bolton, but it fit very closely with the way that Sam wanted to play and his tactical model. So the test we used was 320 meters in 70 seconds. You ran it 6 times. You had a 70-second recovery between each repetition. And what we were looking at was your heart rate response. We wanted to see how high your heart rate got at a very controlled running speed. And then as we would retest in week 2, week 3, and week 4, we could see those heart rates coming down because you're running at the same speed, you're covering the same distance in the same time, but it's coming at a lower cost, which is an indicator of how much fitter you've become aerobically. So one of the questions you asked earlier was when we get the balls out, and I said we get it out on day one. One of my training objectives within both the running and in the small-sided games and the possessions is how much time are the players spending above 85% of their maximum heart rate, because that is what's going to drive the adaptations that I need to produce with the players to improve their work capacity. One of the limiting factors in football endurance specific to players is the oxygen delivery system, the cardiac function. So even in the off season, if you cast your mind back, one of the runs that we would do with you was you would do 6 4-minute runs with a 2-minute recovery interval, and you were sent away with a heart rate belt, and I wanted to know how much time you'd spent in the red zone above 85% of maximum heart rate during each of those runs as a measure of your fitness levels through that.
Right. I wonder how many people listening or watching this would be able to do that and what they get to. I think that could be a little bit of a challenge, and maybe we could get a few people sending them in on social media or putting them in the comments and maybe sending us a couple of videos. And I think that'd be quite an interesting challenge to see where people are at and see how they compare with a Premier League footballer or an ex-one in myself.
Or a slightly elderly fitness coach.
Why are you going to do it?
Why not? Why not? Listen, you know what I was like as a fitness coach. I would join in as much as possible. As much as possible.
Love the
You
challenge.
can't just give the message. You've got to live the message, right?
Brilliant.
So, and I am knocking on a little bit now, but I'd like to think I could still do. I don't know if you knew this, but actually, through June, when you lot were all doing whatever it was you lot were doing, having a time off, having the time of your life, drinking cherry Coke and eating ice cream, I used to train my bollocks off. right?
Why?
Because, well, always thinking, always one step ahead of the game. I knew what was coming because I'd planned pre-season, so I knew what the runs were and everything. So I thought, right. And I never used to go away through the summer. I always used to just go back to the farm and help out on the family farm and work through that. And then there was a local gym I used to go to and I'd do my running at night. So I thought, if I go back and I join in, not the football stuff, but the running stuff, then I would I would gain credibility with the players a little bit. There are, and you've said this before. You said about your fitness coach that you had at Leeds. You respected him more because he could do it.
Yeah,
Right.
100%.
So I would work and I would join in the runs for the first couple of weeks, and I would, I'd try to be I'd be competitive, and I'd be like, this is what it takes, this is what we need to do, and all the rest of it. And then I'd do nothing for the rest of the season, and everybody would say, "Hey, Lammy's fit, isn't he?" And I'd just dine out on that reputation for the rest of the year. I'd be like that, get the cigars out, job done, job done.
Love it.
But there was, I remember having to doing that end stage rehab with Phil Jones. I think you'd moved on by then, but Jones
I had, yeah.
doing the end stage rehab, and everybody was like, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm running with Lammy today," and everyone was like, "Yeah, good luck, mate, all the best."
And you were made up.
I was buzzing. I was like, "Job done, job done." So
Class.
that's an insight into the slightly sadistic mind of the fitness coach, I think.
Class. So one of the things, the other things I wanted to speak about, and I think this is very important for what preseason is like. If you were, say, 3 weeks through preseason, and you were to lose a key player, now one of your biggest players in your team, and they essentially are going to miss through a 6-week preseason period, they're going to miss the next 3 weeks leading into the season. How does that then affect the player going into the season? Because say essentially he's going to be out for 4 weeks. Well, you're 1 week into the season,
Yeah,
and then you're in the season, but you've said you wanted 6 weeks of a preseason to get him
yeah,
fit. What's the
yeah.
pressure to get him back on the pitch?
Yeah, it's massive, and this is where you don't learn this when you're doing your sports science degree. Politics comes into play. You're under huge pressure. You've mentioned a key player. The most successful teams are the ones that keep their best players available for the longest amount of time. And that's at any level. Doesn't matter if you're Manchester City, and you go, or Liverpool or Arsenal, you're going for titles, or if you're another club down the bottom end and you're fighting for survival. You need your best players to be available for selection as much as possible.
And it's statistically shown, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's in any sport. Increasing player availability is a massive part of the fitness coach's job. And I think that leads to its own pressure. Sometimes we can be overly cautious as fitness coaches because we're seeing. My view is, as fitness coaches, we're always trying to drive performance levels to new heights, and that means players have to work hard through the preseason. And because although the data that we've got from GPS and other systems gives us more of an insight into the player, sometimes we interpret that as, oh, we need to do less. We need to manage their load is the terminology, isn't it? And sometimes you talked about the old school preseason that you went through. This is up for conversation, up for debate, and I do think there's an element of preseasons have got easier in the time that I've been involved in the game. They've become, as we've moved away from that, in inverted commas, old school mentality, pre-seasons we're managing load more, and I think that's slightly counterintuitive because I don't think we're giving players the robustness and the resilience that they need to cope with the physical demands of the game, which are getting more and more every year. So in pre-season, this is one of the reasons why I love pre-season. We've got an opportunity to drive performance levels without worrying too much about the game at the weekend. and developing fatigue for the game at the weekend. So, we can push players that little bit further. Losing any player in pre-season is a nightmare. It's a disaster. And it's something that I used to take quite personally, because I felt that is how much of that injury is down to me, and what have I got wrong in terms of have I missed something, or have I mismanaged that player's load? And injuries are always going to happen at points in the season. You can't stop if a defender goes through the back of a forward and rakes the studs down the calf, and they're out for 2 or 3 days. Those are going to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, in answer to your question, you do then come under pressure when those players are missing, because players become better when when they're injured. You've got players who 3 weeks ago they're shit. We don't he's rubbish. He's useless, and suddenly they're injured, and then 2 weeks later we need him. We could have done with him today. When's he back?
Yeah.
So
does there come a pressure from a manager or the board to get a player fit and get him on the pitch quicker?
both.
There has to be, surely.
Both. The pressure comes on. I mean, the pressure first of all comes onto the medical staff. What's the injury? The first question the player, the manager, and the board ask, and the chairman asks, when are they going to be back? That's what's the time scale? What are we looking at here? Now, the biggest predictor of injury is previous injury. So if we take the case of a hamstring injury, which is the most commonly occurring muscle injury in football, and the numbers of hamstring injuries have increased massively, a player with a previous hamstring injury is 33% more likely to suffer a hamstring injury than a player with no history of hamstring injuries. And when we're rehabbing a player, even when they've gone through this criteria-based return to play protocol, and they've hit all the targets that the medical team and we in the fitness department have set for them, and they're clear to play, and they've done everything right, there's still a huge risk of re-injury for the next 8 weeks. The majority of re-injuries happen in that 8-week period. So we do have to be very, very careful how we're reintroducing that player back into competitive football. And you do come under pressure to kind of microwave that process and expedite that process a little bit.
I think there's an element of that even from the player's point of view, when they're like walking through going, when's he fucking going to be back? Any chance? And you're having a pop at the physios, but it's almost because, and the fitness staff, because you know how important that player is to the team.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, come on, hurry up, get him back. We need him. And that's only natural, isn't it? Because you don't want to lose players.
Did you ever get an injury in pre-season? Like a significant one that kept you out for a while, or?
No, I didn't actually, because I was very aware of making sure that I didn't pick up an injury, because I realised how important pre-season was. So it was very much one of them where I did everything I could to make sure that I was fit and available. I was always one of them. I'd always be first in to make sure that I got a massage, to make sure that I was trying to take care of my muscles as much as possible. I've got big, bulky legs. So I was thinking the last thing I need is to pull a hamstring, to pull a calf or something like that. Because if I pull a calf, I'm not out for a short period of time. I'm out for a long period of time. And same with my hamstrings. So I was very aware of that and made sure that I did everything that I could. I mean, the amount of times you used to see me in an ice bath.
Yeah.
I loved an ice bath because I knew it kept me on the pitch and it kept me fit. I always bought into that side of things. So I think that side of things was hugely important.
There's an interesting one. You bring ice baths, and we talk about recovery. There was a kind of a trend to avoid ice baths in pre-season, because we wanted to, create that inflammatory response to drive adaptations. And there was a feeling that ice baths kind of removed that inflammatory marker, which drove performance adaptations. I always used ice baths through pre-season, because I think the evidence, as I understand it, is that Ice baths do reduce the inflammatory response for strength training and power training, but in the early part of pre-season, where we're trying to build the aerobic base and work capacity, there's a part of that is what I'm going to get a little bit sports science here, is building mitochondrial density. So the mitochondria is essentially the engine room of the muscle cell, and the evidence is that the ice baths help promote those mitochondrial adaptations
Yeah.
and help improve performance. I had a fairly significant disagreement with a club doctor at one point who was canvassing against doing ice baths to the players, kind of half behind my back, actually, where he was like, "You shouldn't be doing ice baths." And that's where a little knowledge becomes a dangerous thing. You know, where actually, I'm actually trying to drive very specific adaptations in the players, and the ice baths will complement and magnify those adaptations that I'm trying to create, and will not impinge on them. And this is you go back to talking about managers, and when they start taking control and get involved in things that perhaps at the domain of the fitness coach, there are other members of staff within clubs. So when I think back to to pre-seasons that were very, very successful, it was always when all the departments were communicating, were collaborative, had an understanding, because the medical department would play a big part in pre-season too, in terms of informing us fitness coaches of not only when we should be a little bit careful with certain loads, but in terms of prehabilitation exercises, injury prevention stuff, and the coaches will get involved. The masseurs you mentioned, you're always getting in for a massage early. The my relationship with masseurs, I always thought, was really, really important, because players will tell a good masseur will be able to, well, this
Feel.
is, as soon as, if this is a little bit different, there's some
Yes.
tightness here, what's going on, and they're straight, and they're not. They're not going behind the player's back in any way, but it's like,
They're
just
looking
so you're
after them.
aware, we're looking after everybody, and we're all
Yeah.
working together for that goal, which is, the goal is to get
Success.
as many players to the start line as possible. So going back
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
the original question, yeah, you do come under pressure from managers, boardroom, other players, the players themselves. Come on, I've got to be ready. They feel like they're letting the rest of the team down by
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
injured. And
Everyone hates being in a treatment room as a player. It's the worst feeling ever, because you
yeah,
aren't contributing. You're not giving anything for the team. So, yeah, that's one of the things that you feel you are letting the team down. So,
yeah, and
go.
there's a leadership aspect to that. If you're a voice in the changing room, and you're injured, and I rely very much on the leadership group of players to pull other players along through pre-season who perhaps don't have the mental resilience, or it might be a,
Massively.
a player who's come into the club and not really sure. Oh Christ, this is a lot. If you've got one of the senior players who becomes injured, that's a problem, because they don't feel as though they can be vocal in the dress, because they're not out there doing it as well. They're
Yeah.
not in there with us. So that does have an effect as well.
One of the other things I wanted to ask you was, and I'm fascinated by this, um, because if you were to pick a team now, and you said, and you're in the changing room or the office with the manager, are you looking at certain players going, they cannot get injured? So your most important players, and how important is it that you actually keep them fit during pre-season, ready for the full season ahead?
Yeah, without question. I think, and there are multiple studies which have shown the importance of keeping the teams that are the most successful generally are the teams that keep their best performers available for the longest amount of time, for the most amount of games.
Yeah.
So navigating, and every team has them. You know, were Manchester City affected last season by the absence of Rodri and
De Bruyne.
And De Bruyne. So that they didn't break down in pre-season, which is what we're talking about now. But it does shine a light on the importance of keeping your best performers available, and that's Manchester City. So even whatever success looks like for a team, for us at Blackburn, when we were together at Blackburn Rovers, our job description was we must maintain Premier League status. We've got to stay in the Premier League. That's what success looked like for us. It wasn't necessarily winning trophies. To do that, we still had to keep our best players available. Again, going back to something I've spoken about previously, the temptation then is for practitioners to say, oh, he's getting close to the edge. Let's just be a little bit cautious. And I think that can be counterintuitive. I think you build robustness and resilience and you increase the capacity that a player has to not be injured by working hard.
Yeah, but is there not a fear from your point of view if you push the player too much and then he breaks down that the manager looks at you and goes, "That's your fault."
Jen, 100%, 100%, and also you feel it yourself. I've seen players break down and felt physically sick because you think, is that my fault?
Really?
Is that down to me? Oh,
in pre-season or in? Or
yeah,
both?
in pre-season, in training camps, all the time, really. I mean, it's something that I took personally, because I felt that was a part of my job to.
Do you get the wrath of the manager then? Do you get pulled in?
Depends on the manager. Depends on the manager. There was I had quite an interesting conversation with a player who'd previously been at Manchester United. And this is slightly moving off topic from pre-season, but he was talking, that busy time after Christmas
Yeah.
when everybody's saying do less. He told me Alex Ferguson used to go around and say, do more. Everybody's talking about doing less. Do more. And I do think that players have got a capacity to resist injury through building robustness, resilience, through working hard. And sometimes we can be a little bit cautious. But yeah, going back to what you said, different managers, to answer the question, will expect a certain level of injuries as a marker of we're working hard, which is good.
Right, we'll just do a final thought about pre-season and pretty much the importance of it, and ideally what your structure would be or what you'd like to get out of a pre-season. Because from my point of view, pre-season was, I always enjoyed, and this sounds really daft, I always enjoyed coming in at the start and getting a fat test done, because then I had something to beat. So
I
I
always enjoyed doing the fat test on you.
Why?
Well, I just thought, surely those carbs can't be all muscle, can they? Sure. Right, we're gonna do a foresight analysis. Apart from Warney, he's gonna do 8 because we're gonna do his carb.
Yeah, but I used to enjoy that though, because it gave me a goal to try and get down. So if I came back and I was like 9 or 10% body fat, I'd be thinking, right, I need to get to around about 6%, 5 or 6%.
What did you feel was a good body fat for you playing?
Between 5 and 6%.
Yeah,
I was always happy with that. Always felt like that was a good body fat percentage.
I mean, again, this is it sort of goes against the grain a little bit as a fitness coach. And there was always those that you go away from a season with an off-season program. One of the things was it's easier to stay fit than to get fit, and one of those things is don't let your body fat increase too much. Yeah. I was kind of a bit more relaxed as long as it didn't go extreme. I was a bit more relaxed because one of my performance objectives through the off-season was I wanted players to have a rest. Yeah. And I wanted them to have a physical rest. Definitely I wanted them to have a mental rest. And a slight increase in body fat, I thought, because you know what it's like. I'm on you all the time about what diet, directed nutrition, diet, all of that for 9 months, and I think if that 9 months turns into 12 months and we're at you all the time, then
too much.
it's difficult for you to maintain. So I was quite comfortable with a slight increase in body fat, because that indicated to me, yeah, he probably has had a rest.
Yeah. But one of the big things I always like, my biggest problem is I've got a sweet tooth. Love ice cream. Absolutely adore ice cream. Love cherry Coke. Love like fizzy drinks and things like that. So over the close season, I'd always have too
It's a
much.
bit late now, but I just need to write this what we need to
Well,
watch
you
for
know
what.
what?
Yeah,
I'm absolutely awful now for cherry Coke, and obviously for our listeners and viewers who don't know this, I'm in Liverpool now, and you're out in Santa Monica, but I spend quite a lot of time in America, and one of my biggest problems is cherry Pepsi. So I drink loads of cherry Coke, loads of cherry Pepsi, and I can't get off it. So I'm actually going to set myself a task, right? And I'll do this now on air, on this podcast.
bold.
I'm not gonna have a cherry Coke or a cherry Pepsi throughout the episodes of this podcast until we finish the first season. And I'm going to see where we're at, because this is something that me and you used to do during Lent, and you'd set this for a lot of players, was like, let's give something up. So I'd
Yeah.
always think crisps and chocolate were always the one that we give up. But I probably didn't drink as many fizzy drinks at that point because I just didn't like, well, I wasn't used to drinking them. So I am going to give up cherry Coke and cherry Pepsi until the end of this podcast.
All that. Nobody likes to quit it. Nobody likes to quit it, Ronnie.
That hurt me saying that.
Well, you can edit that out later. Nobody.
Yeah,
and also, there's no saying that anyone will ever hear you say that other than me.
Yeah, quite possibly. If no one listens to the podcast,
And
we are what we are.
I should point out to anybody listening or anybody viewing, don't be fooled by the fact that I've just got a picture of palm trees behind me. It doesn't necessarily mean I am in Santa Monica at the moment. I could be in Carlisle.
You are, though, aren't you? You are.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I am.
Yeah.
No, I genuinely am. But yeah, funnily enough, so our other partner in crime for giving up things in Lent was Keith Andrews.
Yeah, what? Yeah.
And this year he texted me. He's introduced that at Brentford amongst the staff.
Has he?
And he sent me a photo. Hello, Keith, if you're listening. He sent me a photograph of things, and he's like, "Hope yous are still doing this." And I was like, "Brilliant,
Class."
yeah,
Love that.
So
Absolutely brilliant.
I think, I might have affected somebody there, but yeah, no.
Okay, so one of the questions we've been asked on social media is, Lammy, I'll go for you first. Best trainer that you've ever had in pre-season, or top three. Give me the top three that you've worked with.
Yeah, like the gold medal is James Milner, all day long. He's just
he's my number one as well. So there you go, number one.
And it's there for a reason, but everybody knows, and the reputation that he has. Pre-season, he's just incredible. And then again, because I mentioned the story earlier, it's Gary Speed. Gary Speed was a fantastic athlete, and as a young fitness coach, just to see the standards that he drove in himself and in others, and his refusal to accept second best was sensational, absolutely perfect. So those top two, by a mile, stand out. James Milner, Gary Speed. What about you?
Number three?
Every other player that I work with.
Yeah. No, my top three would be Millie would be number one by an absolute country mile. Absolute joke of the standard, the way he performed in pre-season. Number two would be Morten Gams Pedersen. Just incredibly fit, naturally fit. Just one of them players that would just run over the top of you in pre-season, but never seemed to work hard at it. Just seemed to come natural to him. So I'd say those two players. I'd have loved to have seen a run between those two players to see who'd win that. I think that'd have
Right.
been. I think that'd have been a decent race, or a decent matchup. Do you think that?
Mort's, yeah, no, I would agree with you. I think Mort's, as much as we say he was naturally fit, which he was, absolutely, he still worked really hard in the off season. Remember,
Yeah.
he usually was. He used to take. If you remember Chris Welding, who was one of the young fitness coaches at Blackburn that we had, who's done very well and is a very established strength and conditioning coach, now a physio actually. But he used to go and work with Mort's for a week and 10 days privately. So Mort's
Well,
very, very good.
hang about. I know someone very close to this video or this podcast who works with James Milner over close season. So
Yeah, I mean, I have maintained my relationship with James over the years, and I have worked with him in the last 2 off seasons.
so it's
As
not a
he,
fluke for them to be the fittest players alive, is it? It's like they have to work at it.
no, and they don't just turn up and rely on the genetics. They are yes, they are genetic,
Workaholics.
but they maximize every ounce of natural ability they have through hard work.
So one of the other questions we've had in on social media on one of our pages was, Lammy, what's your best location or your best training camp that you've had?
Austria, Erdning, the castle which you and I went to. The castle was fantastic. It was, it was. I felt it ticks all the boxes in terms of what we needed from a training environment for that early stage training camp. We were training at altitude. We had lots of different training options. We had good facilities. We had the gym down there, and it was a beautiful, beautiful place to be in. What were your recollections of that? Because it was, isolated. Did you find that you got bored, or
I was bored out my skull. That's why mine's not there.
Yeah.
Mine's Chicago. I absolutely loved Chicago when we went with Villa, and it was just, I think we were there for 4 days, but I love the training facilities. The facilities in America are always top notch because you're in a top university. And for people who haven't been to universities in America, basically every sports department will have their own gym, will have their own swimming pool, will have their own sort of physio setup as well. And it is just outrageously good. And then you're in an incredible city like Chicago where you can go and wander around the city when you've got downtime. You can eat them big Chicago pizzas, which are probably about this deep. I remember going into one of the rooms and Brad Guzan was like, "No, we're getting Chicago pizzas, pizza cake." So I don't know whether it was Chicago the place or just the food, and that was on offer. That was so good.
Chicago's a fantastic place. Fantastic.
You lived there, didn't you?
I did, yeah. It's a dangerous place because I went there as a bachelor and I married the first woman I met. So my
So why didn't you say Chicago when you were asked the question?
Because I'm a professional. Because I'm a professional, Stephen. That's why.
And your wife's not in the room.
Yeah, but she is within earshot. So
Okay.
I guarantee I'll get a yellow card when I'm in 5 minutes time.
Brilliant.
Could potentially be a straight red, to be fair.
Class. Well, Lammy, I thoroughly enjoyed that. I think we've got through pretty much everything there was to get through about preseason. Hopefully people enjoyed it. They'll like, subscribe, follow. If there is any questions, please fire away and send your questions in. We'll try and do a little bit of a follow-up podcast at some point on that. But it'll be probably about a week until I catch up with you now, Lammy, across in Santa Monica. You got any plans this week?
Well, it makes a change from the once every 4 years text message that I get from you. It'll be
That's fair enough.
Yeah, look forward to doing episode 2 in 2035 with you. That'll be good.
Yeah, well, we could actually do the next episode of the Club World Cup, which is in 4 years. So, do you want to wait 4 years, or do you want to do it next week about the Club World Cup? That's just
I've got quite a lot to say about the Club World Cup, so I think we should do that now.
Oh, interesting. Excellent.
Yeah.
Can't wait for that then.